Okay, in this lesson, we're going to talk about the IBK Gizmo slash color. This is the most widely used keyer in the industry, both in commercial as well as film. So I want to talk about a couple of different methods that people use when approaching it. Now, when you're using this keyer, you have to choose between this or usually key light in regards to what will be the keyer for green screen type of work. There's also, of course, the Luminance Keyer and so forth, which is basically a keyer. So if I just type in, keyer or whatever, this keyer has, green screen. It has green keyer. So there's a lot of keyers there you could use as well if you find that those are useful. But the most common ones, obviously, are key light, IBK color, IBK Gizmo. So I just want to kind of go through what I've learned about the IBK through a lot of industry folks. I'm going to go ahead and type in IBK color here. Now, it's common, there's two different techniques when doing the IBK Gizmo, and you'll see this a lot within tutorials, and that is there's what's called the daisy chain operation, which involves a whole bunch of IBK colors that are sort of connected together like this. And that sometimes work and sometimes it doesn't. It's really, I like to try both whenever I get into a keyer. And this is a perfect example with Jack here, because you're going to find as I get to a certain situation like right here where we have this little hole here, and this is real. There's actually he's wearing a weird sort of thing I put around his neck to try to make the scene look futuristic in my own pathetic way. But there is this hole here, as you can see, which is like green, and it's hard for the keyer system to get a hold of these little areas. So the sampled color of the of the difference of what's behind there, it's 50-50. It can give you weird results when you're doing the stacked method or the daisy chain method versus the regular method. So let's just try the first method, and we're going to compare the two. So I'm going to first start with the IBK color, obviously. Plug that in, put my viewer to it, and obviously once again we got to switch this over to green. And then here we have the default size 10, which is always the good start. And then we deal with the darks. So I'm going to take the darks here, and I'm going to go ahead and put a value of, say, 0.01 is usually what I like to start out with. And then I put my cursor on the 1 and use my middle mouse scroll wheel to sort of basically suck in the image until I start to collapse everything. You can see what's going on here. As we do this, we're slowly moving in, and then eventually we're going to have to erode. So if I go ahead and take a look at this, we're trying to encapsulate everything here. So you can see the size here is sort of like a, it's an extension of a blurred, so to speak. So you can see if we put this at 10, it kind of blurs the image a little bit. So if we go all the way back down to 0 here, right, this is what we have. So we're going to leave this at the default 10. And we're going to do our best to deal with this. Now, the common way you do with the green darks here is you'll keep moving until it starts to explode. So it's the explosion you're looking for. The explosion is when you start to pull this back in a negative value until the scene here starts to create this starry, green little dots and so forth. You see how it just explodes off the side. And again, it has to do with the luminance values from left to right. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of do this until it gets basically right there. So again, I'm trying to get all of that data in there. And again, you can also bring this down if you want. If you find that the value of 5 actually works pretty good, you can do that. But you can see how the kind of artifacts we're getting here. So this is sort of like pre-blurring the scene to a certain extent. So it's the color expansion. So I'm going to go ahead and put that to 10. And now it comes to the fact that we can come in here and then start eroding this, or we could do the patch black. If we start doing the patch black immediately, you're going to see that we haven't engulfed or basically the parts of the image that we need to, because it's taking this pixel value here, which is black, and smearing it this way. I mean, I talked about this before, where it's just smearing it towards the normal center. That's what's happening here, and that's why the value is darker. Which, if we were to tell Jack to get out of the way, this is not the color that would be back there. It would be this color, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull this back on the patch black again, and I want to continue to encapsulate this by using an erode. So you can see as the erode hits it, then we get some issues here, right? Well, so one of the ways to kind of combat that is using the green lights. I'm going to put a value of 0.1, put 1.1 in here. There we go. And you can see if I start cranking up the value on a positive number above 1, we can start to back off that explosion that's happening there. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of back it off like that. And again, I'm going to start to increase my erode, which I might over crank past the value. The highest value goes to 5, but you can keep cranking that until it just keeps going and going and going and going. The problem with this is that if we take a look at the original, what we want in an ideal world is to have whatever value this is actually be brought here. But what we're doing as we continue to erode further and further and further out, okay, is we're going to be choosing this value of green, and that value of green is what's going to get smeared in and used in the difference matte. So again, in an ideal world, and this is where the stacked version of the IBK color works in, it's to get as close to the value just before the nostril starts to fade into, say, the green screen here, which gives us a different variation of green. But we're basically trying to recreate the green that's behind him in real life, okay, on the set. When he was on set, what was the green that was right behind it? Well, it's probably the same value as this, right, not this. So that's what's important here. So again, as you can see, we crank this down. We've got brighter values, darker values around the edge, and so forth. But let's go ahead and see what's going on over here. So right here, it's going to take this value of green and it's going to smear it towards this area, and it'll be whatever value's here, which is probably true. The value that's here is probably the value that's over here. And but the further you get away from what you're going to smear over, it's the more variations you're going to start to lose detail, or things are not going to work out too well. But again, I had found that there was a lot of people in the commercial industry that were like, oh, use the stack method of IBK color, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And it works so much better than the just using one IBK color as opposed to a whole bunch of IBK colors. And we found that it depended on the shot. It honestly depended on the shot if it worked for the better or for the worse. So I recommend always kind of experimenting with both methods. So here's IBK color, and I've eroded it down so that there is no remnant of any, blurry edge, because this guy is really out of focus. We shot this at like a 2.0 f-stop, so it was pretty blurry along the edge there. And now I could start patching in. So now that I patch black, it's smearing in that color in, and that's what's it eventually going to do here. So I'm going to just grab this, use my middle mouse scroll wheel, and just go ballistic on this. I'm going to go keep going until it just sucks it all the way in, and there we go. Now if we compare the original to this, it's as if Jack got out of the way, like we told him, get out of the shot, Jack. So the value here, though, is most likely that value there. I mean, it's probably not too far off, right? Again, this is the same color all the way across the board here. There is no gradient here, which probably existed, but because Jack is nowhere to be seen in this shot. I mean, he's occluding what would be the background. This information isn't too worrisome that we have this sharp fall off here as opposed to a gradient. But what's important is you can see if I just take this, the value is the same between here and here. See that? I mean, roughly. I mean, it's pretty rough. There is a variation of change here. You can see as I scrub back and forth, the values of red, green, blue are changing. But in general, it's holding up pretty good. So you just, to keep it simple, you just got to go back and forth between your final IBK color and your read note and go, does it look like I told Jack to get off the screen, get out of the way, and it's the background? And don't worry about this weird sort of area here that's, that looks kind of, it's a kind of an abrupt, contrast between two different edges here. But you can see it does look good, right? Okay, so that's one way of doing it. So let's go ahead. And I'm going to show you another way. So I'm going to go ahead and put IBK color in here again. And I'm going to do the stack method. So let's go ahead and put that in. Again, we got to switch this over to green mode here. And then again, I do the same thing again. I'll put like a 0.1 value in here. And I will start to crank that up. Get it as close as I can. And here's where things can get messy. And that's where you might want to maintain this area, because the green that's behind him might actually be a darker green, but in this case the hair from the size is actually causing an issue. So I'm going to take the size down to 0, right? And you can see what it's trying to do. I'll probably let's add a value of 1 there. So you can see it's a lot darker. So keep that in mind as we go through this process, right? So I'm going to go ahead and try to get as close as I can. And again, you can see we lose it right there. So I'm going to go to my lights and put a value of 1.01. And let's start to crank that up so we can clean up that area. There we go. You're going to have, the more of a badly lit green screen you have, the more you're going to have to start fiddling with these two values, because there's such a contrast in luminance between the greens here. And say if you had a little bit of a patch of red, like dark red over here, maybe a flare from that light, you'd have to come over here to maybe the red lights. Whatever the color it is that you see is polluting your green screen, that's the color that you want to actually dive into. So in our case, we had a very warm light over here, and if we had a flare, we can, you know, fiddle with the lights and the darks of the red, and that should start to cancel out those areas. The same thing with blue. Obviously, we don't have a blue green screen in this circumstance, but you could also fiddle a little bit with this. Mostly, you will usually leave these alone, but mostly you're fiddling with these guys right here. So now that we've done this, you can see the reason why we do this is so that we can get a closer value, as opposed to having a value over here smeared all the way in and sampled as the actual back plate or clean plate. We want to get a value that's right here, a lot closer. It's going to give us a way more accurate reality. Okay, so with that said, you can see that we have this, and again, I'm just going to go ahead and bring this in a little bit more. You can see it keeps breaking. Again, I'll bring this up. Again, a lot of your work, the quality of your work, will depend on how well somebody lit the green screen. I purposely lit this like crap, and you can see we got a hole here. So I'm going to go ahead and just erode a little bit. Try to erode that in a little bit, and again, I'll drag it in just a hair. And you can see we've already lost this area here, you know, which is not good. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to take this IBK color, copy it, right? And again, you can see I didn't do any patch black on this one, right? I did everything here. The size is very low. Now I'm going to take this guy, and now we're going to patch black this at 1. And you can see what happened. It has taken the values here and shrunk them in, which is what we want, right? So here you could see the value here is going to be the value here. It's not going to be the value way out here zoomed in. So this is an incremental process with the patch black. Again, I'm going to take the erode, I take it down to 0. So here's the first one, here's the second one. So you can see what has happened. We are introducing a gradient here because we didn't get everything. So if you see a gradient happening here, which we can see here very subtly, right? If I bring down the slam the gamma here, you can see the gradient. So if I go back to my original IBK color, I might need to erode this a little bit more. You can start to see it go away. See that? So again, we're getting a little too crazy there, but there now all of a sudden we don't have that contrast, right? Now we got to see if did this screen explode. No, it didn't. Problem is this badly lit green screen is so bad that, you know, you could, like I said, you could come in here and fiddle with the blues. So you can come in here and do like a blue light. So I'll do 0.01 or something, and you kind of fiddle with that and so forth. So you feel. But anyway, with that said, let's go ahead and take that. And again, we're going to copy and paste this IBK color, and we're basically going to be squaring the value here. So let's go ahead and put this to 2. Okay, so let's look at the progression. 1, 2, 3. See how it's slowly getting sucked in? And why is this important? Well, if you did have little circles and holes in your scene, small little patches, it's going to localize to that area. So that's why it's important. Not so important on this shot, but if you had like that little hole there, we managed to maintain that hole. So if I come back here, you can see I haven't maintained the hole at all because we had to erode so much. But it would actually shrink it in. I'm going to show you this in future examples as well, how it's beneficial. So again, 2, the next one, we're going to go to 4. This is keeping everything localized in regards to the localized sample of the green screen, right? And then I'll take this again, copy and paste it, come over here, make it an 8, right? And then we're just doubling it each time. So again, this one's going to be 16. CreativeLyons Tutorials is a great YouTube site. I'll put a link in the YouTube for this. Check it out, guys. I'm telling you, this guy is a genius. He's a He's worked at almost every studio. I mean, he's an absolute genius, and he's been really kind to put training videos online. And you could almost say that what I'm showing you here is a certain extension in the future episodes of this of what he did, but I'm kind of showing you what I learned in the industry, which is a combination of that and what he has done. So you can see this one is 8, 16, and now the final one we can go ballistic with. We can take the final one and close up shop. So I'm going to take this and just keep pulling this until we get, this thing's, squeezed in like that. There. So let's take a look at the different variation between the two. So we have, and again, I'm going to try to organize this a little bit nicer for the sake of presentation. There we go. Just kind of move these up, stack them nicely. Okay, so here's the difference. 1, 2. Do you see a difference there? There is a luminance difference here, and here. And then over here you can see, due to the fact that we probably didn't erode enough, we're getting the artifact. So when you see this, and this is hair, and this is why I always say, there's another method I'm going to show you when you're dealing with hair with lots of transparencies in the hair, such as somebody such as Jessica here, Jessica has, all these little details in the hair. That's going to be very difficult to erode, not get these weird smearing artifacts. So you can see, like, what's this all about, right? Well, let's investigate. Let's go over here. It's probably the fact this is a very blurry edge, and we didn't erode enough. So if we go back to our first color, you can see we did get it, but I don't think we got everything. So you can compare the two. You can see there's still some slight influence of this right here. Okay, so again, I can come back to my first IBK color, put my viewer here, and see if I can kind of get rid of that. Oops, actually it's this area right here. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. There we go. So there's the issue, right? So the problem child will always be your first IBK color. So if we go ahead and take a look, cross compare this IBK color with this IBK color, you can see we still have the influence of the gradient of the visor glasses coming out too far. So I may have to come into this first IBK color, take the erode and just crank it up just a little bit more, and then you'll see this as I kind of look at my last IBK color. It's going to propagate down, and again I'll take my erode and pull it back just so you can see it. Go ahead and kind of add some contrast here so you guys can kind of see that. So you can see it there, and it's good to slam your gamma a little bit and you'll be able to see this. So as I increase the erode on the first IBK color, you can see what's happening here. But the key in all of this is to have your IBK color, your first one, as close to the edge as possible, but still encapsulating all the goodies. Now, as we increase this, you can see that we're really starting to reach out to points that are further away. And here's where problems occur along the edges here, because now we're having an issue where, we've encapsulated this area, so this color is what's going to get finally brought way up here, which we know the luminance difference between here and here is very, very different. So that's the only bad thing. So let's go ahead and see what we get in the end. I'll go ahead and put this back. So here's the first, here's the second. Let's take a look at the two. They're not that far off, actually. They're not far off. And again, the benefit of using this technique is if you have a lot of Swiss cheese holes in whatever you're dealing with, whether it's a set where there's a million pieces running around, in your set, and there's like little tiny holes in between the different things that are being green screened, that's when you want to use this. Whereas this, again, works pretty good as well. So let's look at the cross comparison between these two. And again, it's apples and oranges. You're going to find that it's going to work or it's not going to work. So I'm going to go ahead and create a switch node really quick. And I'm going to plug this one in here and this one in here. And I'm going to use my foreground object as the original plate, which we're going to go ahead and we should have done was we should have denoised this, but that's okay. Let's go ahead and put that into the color. And now let's go ahead and just take a look at the difference. So this is our first one set up. And again, we need to set this to green. So I'm going to hit A for alpha and just see at first what we have. So this is actually, we want this mucky area here. Probably the degrain will take care of a lot of this noise. But you can see if I kind of sample this, I'll hold down Control and Shift, and you can see the values here are 0.01. This is actually acceptable to put on a backplate, believe it or not, despite the fact that it's very noisy here. because the reality is any value between 0 and basically 0.05 or lower is acceptable and usually won't hold a trace in your final footage. In the sense of, your what's commonly called your fringe matte, which this would be your fringe matte. A core would fill in all the holes. You can see we're having issues with this highlight here on the nose. We're having stuff here going on. And again, it's really important for you to look at your footage and examine what is going on. Like, why is that? And play through the footage, see where you're getting holes, and you can start to see where your problems are. Now here you can see all the hair detail. I'm going to go ahead and put my viewer to this, and you can see we're getting all this hair detail. And sometimes to check this, I will add a shuffle node. This is like sort of like a quality assurance check. And I will take the shuffle node and flood my alpha channel to my RGB. So now as I'm looking through this shuffle node and I go to RGB, I'm looking at the alpha, and now I can go and look at the original. So you can see how much detail I've lost, how much it may be going a little bit overboard. Look at the matte line. This is the gradient here. That looks about right, but it probably could be crushed a little bit because you can see the actual luminance is a little bit further out here. So if I go to my IBK color, there's a couple options here you can play with. One is the red weight, and this is the red bias here. You can see if I kind of go back and forth, you're getting, back and forth. It's usually you leave these by default. Most compositors will tell you to not really touch these. If you do, you maybe move them about this far. You don't go any crazier than that. So let's go ahead and play with the blue-green, which basically means that if you're dealing with a green screen, you're only usually adjusting the blue weight. And if you're using a blue screen, that means you're using the green weight. So this is not blue and green. This is actually just whatever the opposite of your screen is. So in this case, we have a green screen, hence this is dealing with the blue weight. So you can see as I kind of refine this, it's looking good over here. Let's see how it looks over here. So we're bringing back all of the reflections here. So it is it can be a double-edged sword. We have Luminance Match, which we can click, and that'll start to restore areas such as where there's the highlights of the nose. You can see right here. So for instance, if I go back to in here and I can play around with this, you can actually take your Luminance Match and you can start to bring it up and down. So you can see if I just kind of bring it back. And luminance level, you usually don't want to fiddle too much with this. You can see how it can be used to kind of somewhat bring back the detail there, but it also introduces some stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and leave that off. And you can see Luminance Match can work in bringing back areas of bright highlights. So let's go ahead and just see the influence of that off and on. Always look at the off and on. See what you've gained, see what you lost, right? So that's looking pretty good. You also have auto levels on here. This has to do if you have a highly saturated colors, such as highly saturated yellows, cyans, or magentas. In our case, in this specific case, that actually might work to our advantage. Again, we can come in here and just play with these. The more you fiddle with, the more you, again, I use the word quoting tampering in God's domain, the more you're going to have a lot of issues here. So if I turn this to yellow, right, you can see that it's trying to do its best, but you start to get a harder edge in the midst of that. So again, I could use magenta, and you can kind of see if it's really kind of bringing back all of those heavily saturated areas. And again, I would say we just leave it off. Again, you could try yellow. It's doing a little bit, but yeah, you got to fiddle with it. Now, screen subtraction, use background luminance, use background chroma. I don't want to get into this. There's other tutorials that go over this. This is more along lines if you do all of your compositing within this one compositing node. Just go online and look up a tutorial on IBK Gizmo and you'll find out how to do this. Steve Wright is a great reference for that. But again, we're creating the matte here. We're not worried about anything else, although these are very, very useful tools on their own if you composite straight in, but we want to make a separate matte for the actual matte, and we have a separate area for the despill, which is the RGB information, and we usually combine the two. So that'll be in the next video I'm going to talk about. But anyway, so with that said, we can come in here now. I'll go ahead and get rid of this shuffle node. Or actually, I'll leave it in all the way at the bottom as a quality assurance test. And let's go ahead, and again, I'll switch back to alpha here. And now I can come in here and then go ahead and just do a simple grade node here. So I'll take a grade node, I'll set this to alpha, and we can go ahead and start to crush the blacks. Now, there's a big debate on the alpha that precedes the IBK Gizmo. Some people like using crushed black points to get rid of some of the noise, right? Again, you're winning the battle but losing the war. As you can see, as I crush this, the hair is getting chopped, right? There's also the option to click on such as white clamp here and kind of fiddle with the gamma a little bit. That's another option, right? And also some people sometimes play with the multiply option, bring back details. So those are the three biggies that you'll commonly see within this grade node. Another option you can do, and I'll go ahead and just leave this on. I'm going to offshoot this. And I'm going to go ahead and choose what is the color lookup. So the color lookup will allow you to, and there's a whole bunch of other tools you can use here, is if I go to my alpha channel here, in here, and again I'm going to affect the alpha, is I can take this here and hit H to make it horizontal, and I'll put this and make this H to make it horizontal. Okay, so now what you can see is we are crushing the whites up to a 0.9 value and crushing the blacks at a value of 0.1, right? You can kind of imagine this as being a zit, 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 like a Z shape, but it's having a fall off of a gradient, which gives you a nice, more pristine look than, say, if I come in here and crush the blacks, which is more linear in nature, not logarithmic. So you can see the difference between the two. So let's go back to the color lookup and go back to alpha here. And what you can do is you can slowly start to inch this by clicking, grabbing it, and right-click, left-click, and dragging it over. You can see we're sort of dragging in and cleaning up, but we are cutting off his hair, right? So there's all types of things you can do in here. You can actually come in here if you want, and you can go ahead and click your left mouse button and drag this up, and this is giving you a logarithmic fall off for for the crush. So you can see it back and forth. So that is an option that you can use. Let's talk about the switch in between the two different versions here. I'm going to go back to my IBK Gizmo here really quick, and I just want to show you the difference between the old version and the new version, right? So let's go ahead and click it and give it a minute here. Do you see a difference? Most people would tell you that this method is always use this method. Don't use this method. Oh, no, 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 no. Always use this method. Don't listen to anybody that has, it says this always works, it always works, it always works. Not everything works in every situation in compositing, so just be aware of that. Do you notice that there's a loss of hair detail? Look at that. Dramatic loss of hair detail. Now, why is that? Well, let's take a look at the two different versions. Here is, I'll go ahead and go back to RGB. There's this version and this version. We have artifacts here, in the process. We didn't erode further enough out, as you can see. That is one possibility. So if you see any weird artifacts here that are going to be an issue. The other thing is there is definitely, might be a little bit of a luminance change in between the two variations. And that is because in this gizmo, let's take a look at it, we are sampling a value. If I come down here and kind of move through this, you're going to find that we're going to be sampling this value all the way up here. So, it's the distance of a different variation of color that gives us a little bit of a difference. So again, you can see the difference here, right? And then anytime you see this kind of stuff is a big warning sign. Okay, that's what's going to probably cause issues. And a lot of it has to do with your first IBK color. If we go back to it, you can see it doesn't include this hair material here. So one of the ways around that is by introducing a sort of inclusion of the mask. All this is doing, if I put my viewer to this color node and hit A for alpha, is it's basically defining an alpha edge. That's all that's going on here. So you can see this area right here is black, right? So what I could do is I can create I can come in here and artificially introduce more of a cutout matte. So I can go ahead and add a merge node here. And this is common when you're dealing with people with heavy, fluffy hair like Jessica, with holes in it. And the erosion process and the keying process, because the keyer or the background color is so different in the variation. Again, you'll have to do this most likely if you have a poorly lit green screen, is to come in here and manually cut that stuff out. So I'm going to go ahead and hit O for roto. plug that in, right? So let's go ahead and look at our viewer here, and I'll go back to my RGB, and I'm going to purposely cut out this area here. Oops, I don't want to use a Bezier cusp. Let's go ahead and use a Bezier. And I'm going to go ahead and get as much of this crud out of here without affecting the original piece. So now you can see, if I take a look at my alpha edge here, I have to put my merge mode to stencil. And now you can see I've cut out or added to this. This is the defining line that's going to be used as the smear line. So whatever pixel value that is here in the green is going to be smeared in. So again, I come into here now, and you can see it's doing just that, right? And in this case, obviously, it's grabbing this value, which is, if we denoise this, we probably have a better deal here. But again, I might need to take my roto node, push it out even further, and it doesn't look like it's doing much. So you can see, in this case, now we're getting this interesting artifact. And the reason why this is happening is because this is not aliased. So you can see it's anti-aliased. We have this kind of hard edge here. So one of the ways you can do that is you can add a grade node in here, and you can go to your alpha channel, put it to alpha. And if I take my white point and I drag it to 0, I get absolute hard edges. Now let's take a look at what we get now. Kind of go down the pipe here to this color node. There you can see that's gone. So you can see without it, we're getting an artifact because of the aliasing or anti-aliasing. But once it's a hard edge, we're good to go. So that is proper now. So let's go ahead and look at the final result. And again, I'm going to go back to my alpha, and look at that. Now, again, we probably could denoise the plate, but you can see an introduction that's different. Let's go ahead and turn this stencil on and off, and we'll see what has happened. Now we've retained these new hair follicles. You see that? And that's all because of the fact that, and again, we can clean this up if we can go down the chain here, get to this stage. And these values, if we sample them, are actually 0.002, which are acceptable to be laid onto an actual backplate without being visible as noise. So just keep that in awareness as you kind of do this. So this is a great technique for taking out stuff and so forth. So again, this is the different methodologies that you can use. They work really well. Obviously, we need to create a fill mat for this area here, or a core mat, I should say, that actually fills in these areas. There will come a time, though, where we will probably have to come in and do a little bit of paint work or animated roto work, specifically maybe around the edge of his head here. So if we go to the original footage here, you can see we have this green influence here on his, it gets pretty close. See if we can find a good frame here. Yeah, so this stuff can be tricky, obviously. So you can see if I put my viewer to the gizmo here and go to A for alpha, you can see this sort of working here, and that's where we would do some roto paint work. So we're going to get into that, but again, I just wanted to show you of all of these different realities, what it best works, and then you can decide, maybe I got to use the key light for just one little segment here, one little segment here. Sometimes you will want to use the key light, just to be aware. So as I was talking about this stencil method, if I was, say, doing an example here of Jessica, so I'll jump back to RGB here, and in Jessica's situation, she has these hairs here that are all over the place. You will never be able to get a hold of that information. You can see there is a variation here, right? This green is different than this green here. That's why it's so important to light your green screen really well, and I purposely made this green screen lit badly so that we can do this example. Because even if you can get a little sample of color here, there's going to be pollution by her hair in the shot due to the blur. So you're going to have to sample way out here to bring it in for this. And the best way to do that would be, again, use that stencil method and come in here and just maybe chop out this hair here and put a stencil in. You could even go as far as out here. That way you maintain the erode/settings, but you're extending it manually with this. And of course, you're going to have to animate this as well. So in the next tutorial, we're going to talk about despill before we get into our Uber key.